Welcome to Urogynecology and Pelvic Healthcare. Till now, we have seen female voiding patterns, bladder pain syndrome with Dr. Nikhil Khattar and Dr. Amita Jain ma'am. So, we have seen in this. But how to evaluate a patient when it comes to urogynecology? How to assess the patient of a urogynecology, and especially when we don't have a dedicated whole complete setup of urogyn, because 1 in 3 female have pelvic floor dysfunction. So, these cases are very common. So, how to evaluate, assess this patient? Today, we are going to look forward to the same thing. And for this, we welcome Dr. Karishma Thirani ma'am with us to have on this topic. Thank you, ma'am. First of all, very thankful for accepting the invitation and giving us your valuable time for this.
Thank you so much, Mohini, for having me here. It's my pleasure.
So, ma'am, today we would like to discuss on assessment and evaluation of a urogynecological patient.
Yes, Mohini, I think it's a very, very relevant topic because urogyne patients, unlike other usual gynae patients, require a very, very thorough evaluation. And I think every gynecologist or urogynecologist should be very thorough with her evaluation techniques. And it's not even difficult. You don't need a lot of equipment. If we remember some basic things, we'll be able to evaluate our patients very well.
In urogynecology, it's all about good history, and a good history.
Yes.
So we'll start with history, ma'am. Evaluation. What's specific to urogyne when a patient comes to start?
Bilkul. So whenever I see a patient in my clinic, one of the few things I see before I start talking to the patient, when the patient is talking to you, when she's introducing herself, it gives you a lot of idea about how alert she is, and is she having any how is she nervous, is she anxious about her problem. So this gives you an idea about how disturbed she may be with her problems. Secondly, when you're taking the history in urogyne, normally what do we say? We say do not ask leading questions, but in urogyne it is very important to ask leading questions. So in my mind, I always divide the patient's complaints as what she is presenting with, and the second section is the elicited problems. So I let the patient start with her whatever she's being bothered with, and then I start my list of questions which I try to elicit from her. Normally, in any urogyne case, I think it's a very good idea to always divide the symptoms into the compartments of pelvis, like the anterior compartment, which comprises of the bladder, the middle compartment, which comprises of the vagina and the uterus, and then the posterior compartment, which consists of the rectum and the anus. And then when you've divided the history into these compartments, then you know that you're not going to miss any points. So when we talk about the issues related to bladder, I always divide the symptoms into storage and voiding disturbances. Sometimes patients will only come and tell you that, doctor, I have leakage of urine. You need to ask her more. You need to ask her about the frequency, the daytime frequency, nighttime frequency. How frequently is she leaking in the day? When does she leak? Is it urgency associated or is it stress associated? Then, okay, you took that history. You ask her, how is she voiding? Most of the patients will tell you, doctor, I have no voiding issues. Do not stop there. Go in detail. Tell her what normal voiding is, because like Mohini just said, 1 in 3 patients will have urogyne issues, and these issues don't start in a day. They're very gradual. So most of the patients will not even remember what normal voiding is like. Always ask her in detail. Is there any hesitancy? Is there intermittency? What do you feel when you have finished voiding? Do you feel you are completely empty, or do you have a sensation of incomplete voiding? When you void, is there any burning? Is there any pain? When you get up, is there a dribble after that? All these histories are very important. Then in the middle compartment, uterus and vagina, ask her if she feels a vaginal bulge. Does she have any abnormal vaginal discharge? Is she having any burning in the vagina? Ask her about her sexual health. How frequently are they sexually active? If they're not sexually active, take her permission. Ask her that is it because of your health or because of your pelvic issues, or is it because of some other personal issue? Let the patient tell you, no doctor, it's not because of her health, it's just that we don't do it anymore. That's fine. Come to the posterior compartment. Even if the patient has come only with, say, bladder issues, it takes 2 minutes to ask, are you able to pass your bowels well? Yeah, most of the patients will say, I am a little bit constipated, but I don't take any medications for it. Ask in detail what is constipation according to her. Sometimes there is a confusion, the way patients perceive constipation may not be what medically constipation is. So very detailed history about, it takes hardly a minute more to ask, do you feel the urge to pass motion every day? Or even if you're going to the bathroom, do you feel that you have to strain to take out that last bit of motion? Do you feel completely empty, like you've completely emptied your bowels? No. Or if she has any pain or any bloating, all these histories are extremely important.
So basically just to summarize one thing, I think first what ma'am is very right, जैसे हमें यूजीज में भी सिखाते हैं कि see the patient, observe the patient जैसे वो enter करता है. So ma'am first only say us how alert she is. Basically if she is coming to you with urogyne problem, I think ma'am what you want to stress is the quality of life, by
Definitely.
which symptom her quality of life is deteriorating. I think was just to summarize one thing. Is second thing what ma'am addressed was compartment wise, to see this thing anterior,
so that you
middle.
don't miss anything.
Yes, very true. We'll not miss because we'll not remember everything. So if we divide our symptom by anterior, middle, and posterior, so this will be easy to take the history. Okay, so one was how's the patient see and the border with symptom, and again I think the leading questions are very important in urogynecology.
Very important.
So next, ma'am, and I think one more, this is sexual history. What ma'am say? Take the permission. I really love that thing because we take it for granted. Even as a doctor, we keep the privacy, obviously, when we ask for this. But to take the permission, should I go further detail? Are you comfortable to discuss with?
Exactly. And
that?
be very vigilant about who she has come with. Imagine a 60-year-old lady has come with her 40-year-old son and we are asking about sexual complaints. Or a 20-year-old girl has come with her father. Obviously, you will not ask in front of the attendant. Then you'll make sure that the patient is alone with you in the examination room or wherever, and then you ask her these questions. Otherwise, the patient will not open up with you.
Okay. And in history only, ma'am, just using one thing, be alert at this thing. Second is like, patient, even if we ask the leading question, they are not able to tell it properly. Like, I'll just give an example. Patient will come with increased frequency. Okay, there is increased frequency. Increased urgency. Then again, she has the voiding symptoms. She's not able to literally, next question what I want to ask, my leading question again is the role of questionnaire. So what is the role? If we are taking the proper history in this way, in urogynecology, I've always seen and even learned from you that questionnaires are very important. Even I also practice it. But what is the difference? When we are taking the history, then why is the specific need of questionnaire?
There is a lot of need because, see, first you said sometimes the patients don't understand our medical language. That is why when I said when you're asking the patient about her voiding, you ask her in detail about everything. You may have to tell her what urgency is, what is hesitancy. You describe that when I go to the bathroom, the moment I sit, the urine starts coming out on its own. Does it happen with you? Does it come in one go or does it stop in between and then comes? Okay. You can talk to patient in her layman language because we as doctors are so used to using the medical jargon that we sometimes use it in front of our patients. Now the patient says that yes doctor, I am very bothered. I go to the bathroom 7 times in a day and then I leak once or twice. Now we this is patient's subjective way of telling you. You will start her on medication. You will not know how much she has improved because everything will always depend on the patient's subjective opinion.
Yes.
That is where the role of questionnaires comes.
Basically for the monitoring.
Yes. Once you put it on a questionnaire, you have objectified her subjective symptoms. This not only helps you in telling the patients that, look Swati, last time your score was 7 on 10. Now it has improved to 2 on 10. Plus, if you tomorrow want to publish your work or present it in a conference, it also, or maybe share it with another colleague, you can send the patient's questionnaire. It helps the other doctor also to understand that, okay, this is what the patient was going through. So that is where the questionnaires come into picture.
Ma'am, here, this like patient comes, initially she used to go for just a case scenario. Initially she used to go 3 to 4 times for urination in the whole daytime. Now from 3 to 4 her frequency has increased to 7 to 8, which is also quite normal. That is not an abnormal. But patient is bothered by this. Now to evaluate, to counsel, how to approach it further.
This is a very relevant question, Mohini, because from the patient's perspective, her frequency has doubled. From your perspective as a urogynecologist, 7 times is normal, so you go. But you haven't really satisfied the patient.
Yes.
That is where the role of a bladder diary comes. So I think we will talk about bladder diary in detail later on also, but I like to start with an example. We'll take Mohini's patient. Now this patient shows me her bladder diary. She is drinking 1 liter of liquid throughout the day, and she is going, like Mohini said, 8 times. Now every time she goes, she passes say 100 ml or 50
Okay,
ml
yes,
or
yes.
75 ml. Then I am suspicious that okay, this patient's bladder capacity has gone down. Versus the same patient, if she is drinking 2.5 liters, going 8 times, and every time she is passing 300, 350 ml, there is no urgency. I will show this to the patient and I will convince her, look, that your bladder is doing well. You don't have to worry. If you don't want to
Okay.
go so frequently, you can reduce your liquid intake. So this little documentation, which requires no cost, no invasive testing, will really help you in knowing whether your patient's concerns are genuine or not.
Ma'am, here very important question. Please clarify today. Let us know with by urogynecologist how much water we should drink as per the thirst, as per the weather. At this, like to hold the audience, every population. This is a very common. Like किसी ने कहीं पढ़ लिया hydration is good for skin, good for the health, and like some people जितनी प्यास हो उतना पीना चाहिए. So please clarify by you how much water for an individual is normal.
So I don't think there is any very right answer or a tailor-made answer to this question, because our water intake depends on a lot of things. It
Our
depends on our weight. It depends on how much food and other things we are consuming. It depends on what work we are doing, how much exercise we do. What is the work? What is our workplace environment like? If I'm sitting in this small room with the air conditioner on all the time, or people working in multinationals where the AC is always on, such people may not feel the thirst as much. But that doesn't mean that they do not require water. A second situation can be a sales girl who's traveling on the roads all the time and then goes to the gym for 2 hours in the morning or does Zumba. You can't tell her that, okay, you drink only 8 glasses of water, because obviously her requirement is more. So that is why before saying that you require this much water, you should have some idea about patient's daily activities, where is she working, what her activity levels are like. And if you want one figure from me, then I think everybody should have at least 8 to 9 glasses of fluids in a day. 8 to 9 glasses would round up to 1.6 to maybe 1.8 liters. I think that is sufficient. If you have moderate activity, you're not you're sitting in controlled temperatures, I think this is good enough.
Okay. So we'll come back to our evaluation part.
Yeah.
So we have done with the history questionnaires. Anything else in history? Urinary, fecal, sexual is done.
I think past history we didn't cover because I was speaking too fast and I forgot the past history. I think past history is very important, Mohini, because you would agree that most of our patients are elderly
Chronic,
women. And these elderly women are on a lot of medications already. So there is always a fear of polypharmacy in them. If you don't know about their past treatment and you keep on adding medications, it can lead to more side effects in the woman. Aggravation of some features, increase in the incidence of fall, and all those things. So and if the patient has come alone, she may not even remember the names of her medication because her son or somebody else is getting the medication for her. So it is very important that you ask her to get a list of her medications with her in the next visit. Or ask some family member to write down all the medications that she takes. If the patient is on diuretics, she's taking 20 mg Lasix twice a day, and she's going to the bathroom very frequently and leaking on the way. Maybe you can talk to her internist and ask them to reduce the dose of Lasix. Similarly, if she is on antihypertensive with a diuretic combination, they can be changed to something else if the physician agrees to it. If the patient is taking something which has action similar to anticholinergics like antihistamines or something for her allergies,
antipsychotic drugs,
yes, antipsychotic medications which can enhance constipation. So all this knowledge is very important. History of past surgeries is also very relevant.
Coming here to with on focus especially on the antipsychotic drugs. Some patient, I think everything urogyne starts many things simultaneously. So many patients are on antipsychotic drug also. Like I have seen many patients, ma'am, they are basically incontinence patient. Because of them, they have gone into depression. And then they have not come to gynae, urology or urogyne, but they have gone directly to the psychiatrist. Then they are not improving, and further evaluation come to know they are on incontinence. So the psychiatric treatment also should go simultaneously. It means basically many psychiatric drugs, atypical, antipsychotic, and many drugs causes incontinence also. So how to deal with them?
So, Mohini, I feel that if a patient has anxiety and depression, then the treatment has to go simultaneously. Not all patients may require medications, and if there's a particular
Just
drug which
counseling
is
can be also
yes, continuous counseling of the patient with a good psychologist can also help. The reason I'm saying this is because anxiety is one of the known causes of urgency.
Very
And
true.
bladder issues are very common in women who have OCDs or anxiety or clinical depression. So if you stop that treatment, then your treatment will never be able to take care of the patient completely. So this because a lot of bladder is under a lot of control by the brain. And
Okay.
if the
So
brain,
that's
if the patient is very anxious or depressed and she's not getting treatment for that, then it may precipitate as worsening of her bladder issues.
So that's when we need to take care of this. And same, just like in cases of overactive bladder, if it's started on anticholinergic, patient comes after a few weeks or months of starting with constipation. That is very known side effect. We
Yes.
can't even stop it. And as you already mentioned, ma'am, patient have some of the because their definition of constipation is initially also they have it. So what about we should start laxative diet modification or something? I just want you to give us some brief about biofeedback, something in this. When the patient have chronic constipation already, we need to start, and after starting, if they have the constipation, then how to deal with this thing.
So normally what I do in my practice is that, like I said, I take a very detailed history. If the patient has already said that she has constipation. Now constipation is also of two
Many
types.
types.
You know, mainly two types if
Types,
we can
yeah.
broadly classify: slow transit and obstructive defecation. Now slow transit means ki the patient wants to go to the bathroom once in 2 or 3 days. Now this is the kind of constipation which will be worsened if you start her on anticholinergics. If the patient has obstructed defecation, which is because of a hypertonic pelvic floor, in that case, yes, I will teach patient some relaxation exercises. And, now if I have to start the patient on anticholinergics and she has constipation, I will tell her beforehand that, listen, your constipation may worsen. So if you're not routinely taking laxatives, you can start a little bit of laxative along with this medication. Or if the patient has never tried dietary fiber like isabgol or xylem husk, then I can start it along with the medication. Counseling the patient before starting the medication increases the chances of her compliance.
Yes. So this is the thing: drug history, past history, family history. Any role, ma'am? Family history or something? Anything?
Yes, family history may have a role in conditions like stress urinary incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse. If the patient has these conditions at a younger age, then these histories are relevant. We use a lot of vaginal estrogens in our patients. Then you should have a family history of genital malignancies in such women. And a history of diabetes in mother is very important. If a 40-year-old is coming to you and she's not been evaluated for diabetes, in that case, you can get a diabetes evaluation done for her. So family history also, and recurrent UTIs can sometimes also happen if a mother has had history of recurrent UTIs. They say there's some genetic predisposition. It can also happen.
Yes, nowadays research is coming for this.
Yes. Also. So family history definitely has a role, and if even if you don't want to spend too much time on it, you can just briefly ask her if your mother has had any such issues in the past, or your elder sister,
siblings, or mother. We can have the family history also.
Yes.
Just getting deviated from our original topic. Like postpartum, you said, and I think pregnancy itself is some of the very important risk factor for pelvic floor dysfunction.
Yes.
Here, what I want to specifically ask: in pregnancy, postpartum, when we say that there is suppression of the estrogen hormones, are there vaginal estrogen, are they indicated, or they have any role in incontinence or something for vaginal rehab? Basically, in postpartum pelvic floor rehabilitation, do any vaginal estrogen has its role?
No. And if the patient has no menstrual issues in the postpartum period, then I usually don't recommend estrogen at that time.
And just to focus this, so I'm saying it's out of the topic, but when it comes postpartum, what normal care we can advise? If you could just tell us, audience, for
so
the
I
doctors.
think postpartum period is an opportunity for all urogynecologists. If you have access to postpartum period patients, if you're working in a hospital where you have a simultaneous antenatal department also going on, then use it as an opportunity to counsel these women about postpartum exercises, because this is the time when a woman is going to be at home. She will have a baby to take care of, but she will also have some time for herself in the hands. So at that time, she should be counseled about postpartum exercises, pelvic floor exercises. Usually in the postpartum period, women are at a rush to lose the excess pregnancy weight and to hit the gym so that the weight is lost. But at that time, your pelvic floor also needs exercise. So even that should be started, and the patient will be very happy, very willing to start if she knows what she has to do. Again, a little care has to be taken that these exercises shouldn't be started before the scars have healed. If the episiotomy, exactly, if the episiotomy scar is there, then she should wait for the first 3-4 weeks for the scar to heal. And only then, when she is pain-free, then she should start these exercises.
So here also one important point, just to summarize what ma'am has said, is that explain the patient. Patients are willing to do the exercises, but if they have the knowledge, then only they will be able to do it. So here again, I'll just ask again, ma'am, Kegel exercise, I think, is not the only exercise for pelvic floor strengthening. That is very a misconception that Kegel exercise is only. I think there are numerous exercises which can be done for pelvic floor strengthening.
Yes.
So this is there. So I think we are done with history, ma'am, in short.
Yes,
everything.
I think we have covered most
of the points. Like proceed for examination. Anything before exams?
So examination again, like history, has to be very thorough. The examination starts when the patient gets up and starts to walk. Always observe her gait, because a patient's gait, her way of walking, gives you some idea about her neurological integrity. Check her weight, check her height, know the BMI. There was a time when we thought that India is a country where only underweight people exist, but now, according to a recent study, 30% of our women suffer from metabolic syndrome. And out of these 30%, 50% have urinary incontinence of some form or the other. And weight loss in itself is
a treatment.
Yes, it's the first line treatment. You will not know just by looking at the patient. Some patients may be really tall. And they may look average build to you, but when you look at their actual weight in BMI, you'll know that the patient is on the higher side. Exactly. So it takes 2 minutes to calculate this, so always have that. Then you start with the general physical examination like you do in all patients. Let's come to the abdomen and the local examination, which is more relevant to us here. In the abdominal examination, always look at scars. Sometimes a patient may forget to tell you about a previous surgery which she thinks is not relevant to her particular complaint. But by looking at the scars, you will know that, okay, something has happened, and it's good to know. For example, a surgery for incisional hernia, which is completely not related to prolapse, but according to the patient. But if already a mesh has been put, or incisional hernia or any other hernia in the body gives you an idea about a tissue weakness. So this little thing will give you an idea about her. Then always palpate the suprapubic area. Is the bladder palpable? The patient may not give you a history of voiding, but a palpable bladder says a lot. Any other abdominal mass locally. When you come to the local examination, just inspect the patient first. Do not be in a hurry to put in a speculum. If the patient is in pain, take her permission. Do not be in a hurry to do a very detailed examination. Look at the outside area. Is the vulva normally formed? If you can see any scar marks, any white pigmentation in that area, any atrophy of the vulva, this is all very relevant. Then you gently separate the lips, ask her to cough. Look for stress urinary incontinence. Again, for stress urinary incontinence, you may not examine the patient in very full bladder. Examine her in comfortably full bladder. Once you have look at the perineal body, look at the anal sphincter, ask her to squeeze. Yes, that will give you a lot of idea. This is not really touching the patient or putting any instruments, but you will have a lot of idea about some basic things just by looking at that area. Then you can ask your patient to go and pass urine. When she comes back, lies down again. Normally what I do in women with recurrent UTI or women who have difficulty voiding or any other voiding history, if it is positive, I do a post-void residual examination immediately after voiding. We have a system in our clinic where we measure the amount which the patient has voided by keeping a basin in the pot itself. So patient sits comfortably, we measure the voided volume, and then we quickly do a post-void residual at that time if it's required. And once you do the post-void residual, you have some idea about it. And then if the patient is a case of prolapse, you ask her to cough again. You do the empty supine stress test. If it's negative, move to the speculum examination. If there's prolapse, look for prolapse. Do a compartment-wise examination. Do a general gynae examination that we usually do, looking for discharge, cervix, vaginal walls. When you're doing a per vaginum examination, always look for bladder tenderness on the anterior wall, bladder and urethral tenderness. I feel it's very important. It gives us a lot of information. You'll do a per vaginum, you look at the uterus, mobility, all those
But
things.
this are missed out.
But this thing is used because we just put our fingers deep inside. Then
And
why?
I think, ma'am, it's not the fault of even our gynaes that
No,
it's
because
not taught us
we've
in our
not been
during
taught.
residency
Exactly.
days.
True, agreed completely.
1 in 3 female have pelvic floor dysfunction, but I don't think in residency days at least
No,
we
we've
were
not been
taught anything about this, or even we know that this incidence, this number also was not quoted, or
Yes.
this was not a part of even a mandatory criteria to pass the exam.
No,
In
it wasn't.
examination, only the prolapse what would have come. Just that's also basic. No incontinence, no
I
fecal
think it
incontinence.
is awareness both between both with the patients and,
And
with the
the
doctors,
doctors
which is now
also.
increasing. and
Now
it's
this
time.
had, I think, 10, 100 folds it has increased. It's like not very far residency we have done, but still it's coming last 10 years. I think it has a very boost in the awareness on
Yes,
both
definitely.
patient and this thing. And since start of the podcast, I think ma'am is stressing again the very important thing that give time to the patient.
Yes,
It
it's
hardly
very
takes
important.
very few minutes to add everything each on. Be patient, have patience with the patient. Give your time for history and examination, and that will help you in a long course a lot, I think.
It really does because I feel first of all a urogyne patient is usually very nervous and she's been told by a lot of people that maybe her relatives, maybe her physician, maybe her other doctors that it's normal, it's a part of aging. Don't make
That
a
is
big
a myth.
deal out of it.
That is a myth,
So
right?
she's already been rejected by a lot of people. She's already lost her self-esteem because of the problem. So if we don't give her time, if we also hurry with her, then we are not helping her. We are already adding to her lost self-esteem and rejections that she has received from everywhere.
Again, in this thing, ma'am, when the patient comes, like history, I've done examination, whatever the diagnosis I've made, the patient comes in the second visit to us. Suppose she comes in, we should, what I see first, what I have seen the history, मैंने पहले क्या क्या लिया था, what was negative, what was not present, we usually don't cover them or ask them. If only the patient should be again go, because in urogyne I think symptom changes, sometimes it can SUI पहले नहीं था अब था, and I might the patient not give you the history on an examination, you may detect occult SUI. So what in the second visit, is it necessary to repeat all the same performer, everything detail, all history, or how to proceed?
So Moini, my first in the examination we left one very important thing. I think we
Leave
should
it
not
at-
leave it because already, like you said, not many people talk about it. That is the examination of the pelvic floor muscles. So while coming out, when you're doing the per vaginum, while coming out, always palpate the
Leave
muscles
it at-
and do an Oxford score to know the strength and document it in your findings. Now you said that the first appointment is over, second time the patient is coming. So in between these two appointments, there is something that I give the patient in between based on her symptomatology, and that is a bladder diary or a bowel diary depending on the symptoms that she has presented with. Because we are both doctors. If suddenly I hold you on the spot and say how many times did you go and pass urine yesterday, you will not remember. Even I will not remember. How do we expect a patient who has come with say with prolapse? She didn't think she has a urinary issue, but I feel that her bladder is coming out. I want to know about the frequency. I suddenly hold her on spot and ask how many times do you pee. Obviously, she will not be able to answer accurately. So that is where a bladder diary or a bowel diary helps us. So now you have the patient with you on the second appointment. You've seen her bladder diary and you feel this is not all right because she told me she goes 5 times. But when she is documented, she is going 10 times. So this is where you jump in again and you say
again detail.
Are you sure this is what happens with you every time, or did you get conscious while filling the bladder diary? If she says, "Nahi, doctor, this is what happens with me every time," maybe I didn't tell you accurately last time. So that is how you get sort of validation कि अच्छा अब ये history मैं दोबारा ले लेती हूँ, because asking the entire history alone again
When I guess.
will be difficult for you also as
For
a
the
doctor,
patient
and
also.
for the patient also, that why am I questioned about
Hmm.
these problems again and again.
So whatever the relevant is, that we can give a
Yes.
subset of the questions which is
Yes,
focused,
yes,
and we can switch over to bladder diary. Very important
yes,
topic.
because yes,
It's-
I feel it's very important for any urogynecologist.
for the
And
checking
just
it.
before the podcast, I was telling you, Mohini, that how handicapped I feel if a patient refuses to fill the bladder diary.
I know. I've seen ma'am.
Yeah.
Without bladder diary, ma'am won't start your treatment.
So
It's very important.
yes, I feel it's very important, and it's not only important for me. The first thing I tell the patient is that this is your homework. It will not
Hmm.
cost you anything, and then we give them a printed bladder diary. Once you leave it on to them that आप print out निकाल लेना, तो भरने का chance और कम हो जाता
और
है.
ज्यादा. Very true.
So for the bladder diary, you can get a printed bladder diary freely from internet. The one that I use in my practice is the AUA, the American Urological Association bladder diary. I feel it's very good because it has columns. It has time on one side. 1 day का 24 hour का एक page होता है, and then there are columns for the type of drink that the patient has had. So drinks, how much, what, and how much. So if she's drinking water,
Quantity and type of the drink.
yes. So now the patient will have to measure every time she'll get irritated. So what I tell her is that you measure 1 cup and 1 glass on first day only, and write down that measurement, that 1 glass is 220, 1 cup is this 150 ml say, and then 3 days you don't measure, just write 1 glass, half glass, 1 cup, half cup. We will know how much she's had. We don't need 5 ml precision.
Hmm.
So next column is, and you tell her to write all
I
the
think
fluids.
this is more simplified. This is Dr. Karishma Thirani's version of bladder diary. Ma'am has really, it's very nice
Yeah,
and simpler
because she
thing
will
to
not
do.
have to keep measuring all the time.
That's somewhat embarrassing also and cumbersome also
Yeah,
for the
so
patient.
she knows that my glass is this much. I'm approximately having half a glass,
So
so
she's
I'm
more
just
comfortable
writing
and very
half
easy.
glass,
And
yes.
especially who are not educated, for them, that's more
That's
again
even
better
and
for this them.
the next column is urine, trips to the bathroom. How many times? How much? So for how much, this is the point where your patients will not fill the bladder diary, because this is what people are not comfortable doing. So what we do, we ask patients, we have beakers with us. We either ask them to purchase them from us, or we tell them that 2 लीटर का कोल्ड ड्रिंक का बॉटल आता है, ज्यादातर हर किसी के घर में होता है, या बिस्लरी का बड़ा बॉटल आता है, आप उसका ऊपर का पार्ट काट दो. So it gets converted into a
Cylindrical
wide
tissue
mouth
point.
cylindrical jar. Now everybody has 50 ml ka measure at home for measuring rice or dal or making cakes or whatever. You take that 50 ml measure and keep adding 50 ml water into it. And then with every cup that you put, you take a permanent marker or any pen and keep making markings of 50 ml, 50 ml, 50 ml, 50 ml. Then all you need to do is, you don't even have to buy a beaker. You can just use this.
Okay. That's again more simpler and comfortable for the patient.
So nobody has to buy anything. And even if they're buying, they can keep it with them, because bladder diaries can be used for follow-up also.
Follow-up also. Obviously, follow-up I think more important when the patient initial condition is very
Exactly.
severe. Then we can use
Then
it.
next column is for urge. So if the patient has an urge, you explain the patient
What
what
is the
urgency
urgency?
is. And then she just sticks it there every time she has urgency. Next column is for leaks. And the AUA bladder diary very nicely describes the leaks. It divides it into small, moderate, large. Small is a few drops coming only to your underpants. Moderate is if it soaks or wets your pants or salwar. And large if it comes down to your feet or to the floor. So just telling the patient this, she has to write
This,
S, M or L every time she leaks. And then the last column is for sneezing, coughing or activities. If she feels she has leaked without urge on sneezing, coughing, then she just ticks on that column and on the leak.
Got it.
So this is how this is the bladder diary that I get filled. We spend time with the patient explaining them about the bladder diary. You can ask your assistant or your
somebody
helper.
else
You can teach them to counsel the patients.
how to fill it in, because that's very important.
Yes,
I think
because
for
spending 5 minutes on 5 or 10 minutes on bladder diary with every patient may not be feasible for a doctor who has a lot of who has a lot of load, for example, in government hospitals. So
sure.
wahan pe
Somebody
a nurse or someone can counsel the patient to do that.
I'm switching back. What are the indication in which conditions we should tell the patient to have the bladder diary? And second important question, should the first visit be of bladder diary? Should the patient be advised, or should they wait some symptom? Because, ma'am, as you always said, we all know urogynec patients are very distressed. So, in very first visit, tell them to fill, and then compliance. I think it gets somewhat delayed. Just a very practical question.
Yeah, it is very practical, and see, you have to individualize according to the patient. For example, if a patient has come to you with urinary tract infection, she is in pain, she has burning, she didn't sleep the last night. So in this patient, I will not ask her. I've taken the detailed history. I have realized that, okay, even when she doesn't have a UTI, she has urgency. I would want her to fill a bladder diary, but not today. Let me treat the UTI first. Next time she comes to me when she is better, the pain is not there, the burning is not there, then we'll ask her to go ahead with the bladder diary.
So indication any specific, or all cases of prolapse, all cases of incontinence, or everything?
I think in my practice, I ask all patients who have any bladder related issue. It may be a storage issue, it may be a voiding issue, or a patient of prolapse who has bladder prolapse beyond the hymen. I ask them to fill a bladder diary.
Okay. So any cases with asymptomatic cystocele, should we?
Usually, if a patient is completely asymptomatic, the prolapse is inside the hymen. Usually, if the bladder is inside the hymen, that is your early stage 2, stage 1, patients will not have bladder issues normally.
So that's some asymptomatic, no need.
No. Then if the patient has no urinary complaints, she has come for a pap smear and I see that she has a small cystocele, then no, then I will not ask her to fill a bladder diary.
Okay, so in cases of prolapse with no urinary complaint also, and suppose if prolapse with occult SUI,
yes, definitely,
we'll see in the bladder diary also.
Yes.
So any urinary complaint, we go for the bladder diary.
I feel it's a completely harmless. If you feel that, okay, the patient will not fill it for 3 days, I am not sure she has urinary complaints, ask her to fill it for 2 days.
2 days. And just on this, what's the role of frequency volume chart?
This is frequency volume chart
only, but
because we have covered the volume that she is passing, the frequency with which she is going.
Intake is not there, so it's like necessary.
Yeah,
means like obviously we have.
So that is why I said that I like the AUA bladder diary because it gives you the complete picture.
So what is the purpose of half done work? It's like
exactly, if the patient is doing it, she might at least write.
The intake is better. Anyways, easy and better to calculate.
Yes.
Okay, that's the issue. Then interpretation, how to interpret? I think that's again one next level question and next task.
No, I think if the patient nicely fills the bladder diary, it gives you so much information.
So what basic points we just to know to a routine gynae and everybody to
let's start column wise only. The first column was about the drinks. So first of all, you'll have the total intake.
Okay.
Then you will also get to see the distribution of fluid. For example, a lot of times what happens is, doctors who are very busy like Mohini, and they will not drink if they're in the OT. Then they will come out of the OT at 4 p.m. and they will drink 3 glasses of water together. And this happens to a lot of people.
Yes, very true.
So you will know the distribution of fluids. If the patient is drinking a lot in the evening and then waking up 3 times in the night, you have your answer there. Yes. You will ask her to restrict her fluid in the evening and distribute the fluid throughout the day. Third will be the type of fluid. Just a few days back, I had a young patient and who had urgency, and then she filled a bladder diary. She was having 3 cups of coffee and 2 Diet Cokes every day and hardly any water. Because she worked for a company where they used to have, coffee and Diet Coke.
Coffee is like something very frequent in corporates. Yeah. What I have heard.
So I looked at her bladder diary and I said, "You don't drink water." She said, "I didn't realize I don't drink water."
Okay, one thing is like distribution, very important point. Type of drink, caffeinated hai. And second, bladder diary sometimes it work as a therapeutic also, right?
Yes.
Patient realizes
she realized that she's not drinking water
and she's taking diuretics.
Maybe tomorrow if somebody asks me to fill a bladder diary for myself, I will also see that I'm not drinking as much as I'm advising others to drink. So I think it's.
I think one more indication, doctors, especially urogynecologists,
once in a while, we should fill our own bladder diaries and see what it feels like.
So just sorry to that next one.
Coming to the trips to the bathroom. Now the patient told you she goes 10 times. And you realize that in the morning when she's waking up, she's having 4 glasses of water because her dietitian told her that if you drink 4 glasses of water in the morning, you'll detoxify yourself. And it's in the morning when she's going 3-4 times every half an hour. But rest of the day when she's having liquids like, spaced out, she's not going as many times. You can tell the patient that, listen, your frequency is only high when your intake is very high. So you distribute that fluid. Then next thing is, like we spoke about, the frequency and the volume. So if a patient is going very frequently, passing small volumes, that is a functional bladder capacity is less.
Okay.
Then it is indicative of bladder being overactive or having some other irritative pathology. But if she is going frequently, her intake is high and she is passing more urine, that is, the functional bladder capacity is high. That means the urine is being formed. That is why she is going so many times. Now, this patient, if she is not drinking so much water but making more urine, maybe she is having more fruits and salads and food items which are leading to or high metabolism, or she is on diuretics. In
That's
such, so that is how we'll know.
Correlated with history.
Correlate the frequency and volume with each other, and then with the intake. Secondly, there are patients who come with nocturnal increased nighttime frequency, and you always have the doubt of nocturnal polyuria. So again, you can separate the daytime and nighttime output and then see the fraction of
how much is there.
How much.
And all the indices, nocturnal
exactly, whether it is there, whether it is nocturnal polyuria or not. So just by looking at the bladder diary, you will know what her functional bladder capacity is. Now, there is an indirect advantage also of this. If I know that my patient's functional bladder capacity is 250 ml, I want to do her Euroflow, and she's holding 500 and she's having pain, and then she does the Euroflow, then obviously there may be a problem in the Euroflow also. Because normally she goes at 250 ml. So ideally these flow studies should be done, should be a representation of a normal.
Reflection of what physiological is.
Exactly. So this also gives you an idea that, okay, this is the voided volume in Euroflow and it's corresponding with the bladder diary. You know, okay, this is what it is. This volume will also help you in knowing the filling speed during urodynamics. Functional bladder capacity से you can calculate कि किस rate से हमें urodynamics में bladder को fill करना है.
Yes, very true.
Then number of leaks she is having, urgency, type of incontinence, वो तो everybody sees, and it's really helpful, especially in patients of mixed urinary incontinence.
What is predominant and what is her predominant
exactly
symptom?
If a patient has a lot of urge, she may ignore कि sneezing के साथ 1-2 drops आ जाते हैं. But when she's filling it in the bladder diary, she'll know कि this happened yesterday because I sneezed twice. So you know कि she has some component of SUI also. Maybe it is not as bothersome, but it is there. So there is so much information that we get from the bladder diaries.
Mama, just, I don't know, it's a real or hypothetical question. Suppose a patient is having a functional bladder capacity of 200. She has the urgency. She's not able to hold with that. Okay. So now with the 200, we started her urgency and this. Now, because she's not able to hold with 200 bladder capacity, when if the bladder capacity increase, obviously with modification, treatment, whatever, suppose she's able to hold till 300. Now at 300, her SUI is demonstrated. Is like something like that can happen? Means because I would just want to say that bladder capacity first, like it did mild, moderate and severe SUI. So might be because she's not has so severe urgency that SUI is not elicited. But when her urgency get controlled, because sometimes with patients with increased overactive symptom,
it can definitely happen, because if she's able to hold more and then while holding, if she's doing some activity then in such patients you will advise them timed voiding.
Yes, that's one other thing. But it can, what my question is like, when the patient will have severe urgency, me may not able to derive by history or bladder diary also the SUI component, because she's not able to hold. The mild SUI may not be derived, and if you need something operative, again it may be. That's why I think in urogyne, we don't directly switch over to the operative. Even if the patient is for operative, it takes time.
Yes, take time. Don't be in a hurry to do a surgery. These problems are chronic.
And these are functional disorders, something.
Yes, they are going to remain chronic for a long time. So take your time before you plan an operative procedure.
So this may be demonstrating severe urgency, SUI may be, or a delayed family. Like she got here, like patient may come and says like, "Pehle mein urgency hi thi, now I'm getting with SUI." Because she used to go. It can be there with severe urgency and mild. It can be the component.
Yes, it can.
They
SUI
did
can happen with
anything, no?
any.
And any rule of minimal voided volume in SUI?
Yes, definitely.
So
Minimal
that's
voided
really-
volume. If a patient is having leakage, that is why we do the empty supine stress test. If a patient is leaking on an empty bladder or the so-called empty bladder where the bladder has 20 ml or 30 ml of urine, then it is suggestive of severe SUI, maybe ISD, intrinsic sphincter deficiency.
No, when in the bladder diary, if the patient is having some minimum voided volume of 20, means she has just urge on 20. She had the urge and she goes and she passes only 20. Then what is the significance or something, or just
If the patient has no residual volume in your evaluation and she look at her bladder diary and she's going at 30 ml, 40 ml, that means she has extremely low functional bladder capacity. At this time, you should also see that are all volumes like that,
or only
are
few.
only few. Like for example, before going to bed,
Up bed, yes, and going to outside
or going
the house,
out, going to the
patient
gym.
have the routine habit.
Yes,
to
because
getting
sometimes it is also, like I said, driven by anxiety. That okay, now
Yes.
I'm going to go to bed. I don't want to wake up, so I'll go 2 times.
So that's one thing. So
Yes. In that case,
in
counseling
the
along
whole
with
evaluation
medications-
process, every time to go back to history and correlate.
Yes,
and
definitely.
activity, everything is correlated, like history, blood, nothing individual. You can't just कि किसी ने इसको bladder diary भेज दी भाई. It's like this is not interpretation. Like I think bladder diary is somewhat like a reflection of urodynamic. You should know what the question is to be answered.
Yes, exactly.
What you are looking for, that's need to be, and what is it comes. Okay. Anything else in ma'am, with the bladder diary, you even mentioned about bowel diary. So I wanted like bowel diary, food diary, pain diary, just a
So
brief.
bowel diary, I usually ask my patients who have constipation, fecal incontinence, or features of IBS to fill them. So unlike the bladder diary, you need a bowel diary for 5 to 7 days. And the bowel diary that I use has a Bristol score for the stool written outside. It is pictorial, and all the different types of stool, type 1 to type 6, are drawn there. And then when you go inside, there is a column for what did you eat. Then there is a column for urgency where they have a fecal urgency, where they have labeled it as 1, 2, 3, mild, moderate, severe. Pain during defecation, type of stool, and whether any incontinence, yes or no, and any other remark the patient wants to put there. So bowel diary is slightly easier than bladder diary because you don't have to keep measuring anything, and you go and pass motion 2 or 3 times maximum in a day. So it is less cumbersome, but the documentation of patients' food is often very insightful in both constipation and incontinence patients, fecal incontinence patients. If you see a patient is having too much processed food, which I see a lot these days, patient is having too much outside food or too much processed food. Oftentimes you will see packet of chips, 1 full packet of biscuits, or pizza, or too much of this outside wraps and rolls and all those things.
I think in this one more thing is in history also, patient don't give the history of the Ayurvedic, homeopathic, and the churan they take usually elderly people for the bowel thing. They have a lot of churan. We need to keep the knowledge updated, which churan is now trending for.
I know, Kayam churan. I wondered for the longest time how it helps in relieving constipation. Then I met one of the gastro and he told me it increases the gut motility like anything.
Okay.
So now I don't advise my patients.
That's why I also now keep myself updated in the churras which are trending for constipation. I think that's what they.
Yes.
So bowel diary is, I think, very nicely. Pain and food diary also just.
So usually food diary.
Just in a bowel diary, should we do it in posterior compartment prolapse with no bowel complaint?
Usually I don't.
It's only when the patient have any urinary or the fecal, then only the relative bladder diaries should be filled.
Usually the maximum use I've got it is in patients with constipation. I
ODS,
get a lot of
obstruction
inflammation.
defecation syndrome.
Yes, and in patients who have IBS. Because in IBS, food plays a huge role. And just by eliminating certain things from the patient's diet, they get a lot of relief. And IBS is often associated with other pelvic floor disorders like bladder pain and all those things. So IBS and bladder pain usually come together. So it gives a lot of information there.
So with bladder pain, we'll switch over to pain diary.
So pain diary, usually I usually give it to those patients where there is a very confusing history of pain.
Okay.
Or where the patient has not been able to identify her triggers herself. So in those cases, I ask them for a pain diary. In patients who are relatively clear about their histories, that my pain is, triggered by intercourse, or when I eat spicy food, or when I am anxious, in such women, I don't ask them to fill a pain diary.
And what means like filling pattern with urine, how much the pain is, the pain score.
So usually in such patients of bladder pain, I modified the bladder diary. I convert the leakage column into column for pain.
Okay.
Because these
Yes.
patients
come
don't
with
have
the
leak.
leakage. Yes.
So I put the VAS score in that column, and I tell them that whenever you have pain, you give it a number. I explain
Yes,
them
how
what the
much
VAS score is, and then they come and they put a number there. So that is how I correlate the pain. And usually in the management of bladder pain, I use O'Leary Sang questionnaire a lot. Now there are better questionnaires also, but I'm habituated to that, so I use that a lot, and we keep on revising the
Monitoring.
score. Yes, with every
Visit.
every 3 or 6 weeks, depending on what kind of treatment the patient is on. Not every visit, but yes, once in 6 weeks we ask her to reiterate her score.
Okay. And in this pain diary, do we include any food items also the column?
Yes, if that is what I'm saying, if the patient is not sure about her triggers, then she writes everything.
So
She
leakage
writes about sexual intercourse, she writes about food, she writes about drinks, she writes about bowel habits and period date.
So pain is like something wholesome.
Yes, because this will give you an idea about what triggered the pain. But usually you will see that patients who have bladder pain, they have, by the time they reach you, they have already figured out a few triggers that, okay, when I have this, it gets worsened. A lot of these patients will be sexually inactive.
Because of this.
Yes. So, but there may be some cases who have not been able to figure it out. So, in those cases, this is very helpful.
Anything else, ma'am, in evaluation? I think history examination. Then comes the investigation that will see some next time.
I think in the basic evaluation,
we have
history,
covered.
Examination, residual volume, and bladder diary are the main things that
residual volume by catheter or by scan, or
it depends on, again, you have to individualize. Because if there's a patient who is very young, already petrified, anxious, having pain, I will not put in a catheter.
Case to case scenario.
So we use the ultrasound in such cases, but there are certain cases where there's history of recurrent UTI, and the patient is not very sure whether she has burning or pain, and but her urine reports keep showing contamination with pus cells or some some bacteria which may be the normal flora in the vagina. In those cases, I would like to do a post void using a catheter so that I can also
color
it will serve two purposes for me. It will give me a sample which is better than a self collected sample, and it will also give me a residual volume estimation for the patient. So in such cases, I would like to do that.
Ma'am, just in urine, how much pus cell above it's like UTI? Because many patients asymptomatic, just they get, as the routine body checkup is very quite trending, so they get a urine report and they come, they don't have any problem. This asymptomatic
even
UTI,
100 pus cells are not to be taken into account if they have no symptoms, because like I said, asymptomatic bacteria we don't treat. Until unless your patient is pregnant or she's planned for a bladder surgery tomorrow, where bladder mucosal
anything intervention surgeries there, so urine
even for prolapse repair she may not be
needed
doing it. But yes, if you are doing a TUR BT for her or something like this, some urological procedure is being planned, then yes, you can treat it.
So, but with symptomatic like 1 to 2, 3 to 4.
So that depends, Mohini, on the way the sample has been processed. So you need to have some talk with your lab. There are two types of sample. One is the manually, where they just take the urine and put it in the slide and observe it under a cover slip. And the other is a centrifuge sample. Most of the labs these days will use centrifuge machine because it's easier and it's... So in the centrifuge sample, anything more than 2 pus cells per high power field are considered as pyuria. But in a sample, if it's been observed if it's been prepared manually and then observed, then I think the cutoff is 8 to 10 pus cells. Yeah.
So, ma'am, this was very detailed, and I think many of will definitely benefit with this, and we have a lot. Just now, for the last few wisdom words or take-home message, just to summarize assessment and evaluation, and especially who I think are not doing or urogyne as such labeled. But this patient, obviously, we have in our daily OBGYN a lot of urogyne patients. So how to give a minimum basic evaluation with minimum equipments?
So I
measurements?
will borrow Mohini's line only, which she said in the beginning, that with a urogyne patient, be very patient and don't be in any hurry. Take a very detailed history. Your history is going to be your best friend because it's going to take you where the patient can be optimally managed. Don't go by what the patient is telling you, and do not ignore the other histories, because a lot of voiding dysfunction patients will present with storage symptoms only. And if you just give them treatment for that, you'll end up making them worse. There is no excuse for not examining a patient. If a patient is not comfortable, that's another thing. But otherwise, never underestimate the importance of examination. So many times, patients of, some presenting complaint is something else, and then the examination changes the entire picture. Bladder diary, urine analysis, ultrasound are basic testing which are required in most patients. And these testings are available even in very low resource settings. These are the basic tests on the basis of which you will be able to manage 70 to 80% of your patients, even if you don't have other specialized equipment. So it's only the rest 20% which may require urodynamics or other detailed invasive testing like a CT or a cystoscopy. For the first 80%, only basic history, examination, residual volume measurement, urine analysis is all you're going to need, and a bladder diary. So do not underestimate the importance of the basic things that we do. Only thinking about that we don't have the other higher end equipment with us. So I think that is the take home message, that never ignore any basic step. Always follow a protocol.
Step by step approach is there.
Yes.
So, ma'am, thank you so much for this thing. And I think it's just we got the topic very thoroughly. And more than that, I think it was even a awareness for both urogyne doctors, and even the patients. Awareness part also, I think we have raised. Have been very nice. Thank you so much, ma'am, for
Thank
the
you,
time.
Mohini. It was
Thank
really fun to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So this we had a very great talk with Dr. Karishma Thirani, ma'am, and please do let us know in the comment section to which topic you want to discuss it further, and with whom, if any favorite urogynecologist or urologist or gynecologist you want us to have the podcast with. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good morning. This is Dr. Mohini Agrawal. I'm a urogynecologist and pelvic reconstructive surgeon. I've done my fellowship in urogynecology and pelvic reconstructive surgery at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. During my tenure of 2 years, I have realized many of the junior residents, senior residents, all have a deep interest in urogynecological cases, but very few or none of them want to pursue it further. The reason what was this, that lack of understanding, or might they find this subject difficult. So years when I decided that let me start an educational channel to help those aspiring minds to make the subject easy and interesting. At present, I am practicing at Chandigarh Children's Hospital, Bhatinda, as a practicing urogynecologist and a pelvic reconstructive surgeon. So, what we are going to see in this channel is basically for all the postgraduate, senior resident, all the practicing gynecologists where they struck with the urogynecology cases. At point they don't know what to do it further. So to start with this, we'll see all the very basic like prolapse cases, history taking in prolapse cases, SUI, stress urinary incontinence, urgency incontinence, or how to approach in a case of mixed urinary incontinence, nulliparous prolapse, conservative, medical, and surgical management of incontinence, and various types of prolapse, prolapse in various compartments, recurrent urinary tract infection, and the list goes on. So everyone, join with me and be a part of this amazing journey, urogynecology and pelvic healthcare channel. Thank you.
वेलकम ऑल। आज हम बात करेंगे वजाइनल कोन्स की। यस, वेलकम ऑल। आज यूजुअली टू स्ट्रेंथन द पेल्विक फ्लोर, स्पेशली यूज किसमें यूज़ होता है, जिसमें खांसी करने छींकने पे पेशाब आ जाए या यूरिन को बार बार जाना पड़े, तो जो भी पेल्विक फ्लोर कमज़ोर है उसके लिए ये यूजुअली फिजिकली यूज़ होता है। ये उन महिलाओं ने नहीं यूज़ करना है जिनको ऑलरेडी प्रोलैप्स है,
ठीक है, प्रोलैप्स वालों में नहीं, पर यूरिनरी अगर शिकायत है तो आप यूज़ कर सकते हैं। बेसिकली 2 डिफरेंट साइजेस के होते हैं, एक बड़ा एक छोटा, 2.8 to 2 to 2.3 सेंटीमीटर के साइज़ होते हैं वजाइना। फिर इसमें बहुत अंदर ऐसा स्पिंडल होता है एंड देयर आर वेट्स ऐड होते हैं। सो इनिशियली टू स्टार्ट विद आप पहले स्मॉल छोटे वेट से शुरू कर सकते हैं एंड देन यू कैन इंक्रीज द वेट। तो ये बहुत अच्छी टेक्निक है, आप घर पे भी इसको ट्राई कर सकते हैं। Obviously first under supervision करा के then you can obviously try at your home also, one of the very good device. Thank you. आज हम बात करेंगे पेस्ट्री की, डोनट पेस्ट्री एंड द गेलहॉर्न पेस्ट्री। गेलहॉर्न पेस्ट्री ये बच्चेदानी के साथ भी यूज कर सकते हैं या स्पेसिफिकली उन महिलाओं के लिए जिनके बच्चेदानी निकलने के बाद भी बाहर पड़ता है, पेशाब का रास्ता बाहर आना, पॉटी का रास्ता बाहर आना, उसमें ये गेलहॉर्न पेस्ट्री यूज हो सकती है। या इवन दिस डोनट पेस्ट्री स्पेशली फॉर उन महिलाओं के लिए वॉल प्रोलैप्स जिनको बच्चेदानी के बाद निकलने के बाद भी पेशाब का रास्ता या पॉटी का रास्ता या वॉल प्रोलैप्स होता है। आगे के लिए इसकी मोर डिटेल जानकारी के लिए हमारे पेस्ट्री लेक्चर को देखिए, पार्ट 1 एंड पार्ट 2। इसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में नीचे दिया हुआ है। थैंक यू। क्रॉनिक पेल्विक पेन, बहुत सारी कंडीशंस क्रॉनिक पेल्विक पेन को रिजल्ट कर सकती है। इट कैन बी रिलेटेड टू पेशाब की दिक्कत, ब्लैडर, वोवल, पॉटी का या वजाइना या सेक्सुअल प्रॉब्लम्स। सो बहुत सारी कंडीशन एक साथ हो सकती है, वल्वोडाइनिया, वजाइनस्मस, ब्लैडर पेन सिंड्रोम, डिस्पेरिनिया जिसे हम बोलते हैं, एंडोमेट्रियोसिस भी एक क्रॉनिक पेल्विक पेन का बहुत मुख्य कारण होता है। तो इसको अगर आपको पेन है, इट नीड्स अ प्रॉपर इवैल्यूएशन फॉलोड बाय ट्रीटमेंट। तो अगर आप बहुत टाइम से क्रॉनिक पेल्विक पेन की समस्या से जूझ रहे हैं तो आज ही अपने नज़दीकी यूरोगायनेकोलॉजिस्ट से संपर्क कीजिए और हमसे संपर्क करने के लिए नीचे दिए नंबर पर कॉन्टैक्ट कीजिए। थैंक यू।